If you walk barefoot across rough terrain for a few weeks, the friction triggers cellular mechanisms in your feet to manufacture layers of new skin. You develop a callus. The exact same biological logic applies to the brain. When your visual system registers a slithering, self-propelled shape in the grass, it triggers an involuntary spike in physiological arousal and an immediate urge to jump back. The human mind is not a general-purpose processor, and it is certainly not a blank slate waiting to be written on by society. It is a dense, pre-programmed network of specific algorithms. Evolutionary psychologists call the core scientific unit of this network an evolved psychological mechanism, or EPM. This renders the old debate between nature and nurture biologically illiterate. Environmental learning does not exist in opposition to biology. It is entirely impossible without pre-existing evolved biological hardware to process it. An evolved psychological mechanism does not process all of reality. It is designed to filter out the noise and capture only the highly specific cues that were relevant to ancestral survival. Just as the eye only detects a fraction of the visual spectrum, an EPM operates on narrow input. This data hits a second step, decision rules, triggering a cascade of if-then pathways. These evaluations mandate a specific output: physiological, behavioral, or secondary data. Every human cognitive response we experience, from the sting of sexual jealousy to the disgust of rotting food, is the precise output of this input-rule-output architecture, shaped by natural selection to solve a historical adaptive problem. If evolution selects for efficiency, why would it equip humans with hundreds of isolated, specific mechanisms instead of one highly flexible, general-purpose learning brain? Consider two distinct adaptive problems our ancestors faced: selecting a nutritious food source and selecting a fertile mate. If early humans applied a single domain general rule to both problems, say, select the first thing you see, the results would be evolutionary death. You would routinely ingest poisonous plants or attempt to mate with an infertile partner. Biological success requires a carpenter's toolbox approach. You don't build a house with one multi-tool. You rely on a massive set of highly specific, specialized tools, each engineered for a distinct task. The exact criteria your brain uses to solve one problem, like detecting the caloric density in ripe fruit, are entirely useless for solving another, like assessing the parental investment cues of a potential mate. Human behavioral flexibility does not come from a lack of instincts. It emerges precisely because we possess thousands of highly specialized micro-instincts, all operating and interacting simultaneously. Because we cannot observe fossilized brains, a common academic critique is that evolutionary psychology relies on untestable just-so stories. This diagram shows the strict top-down epistemological hierarchy researchers use to test their claims. The entire field operates under the top tier, evolution by natural selection. While this overarching theory is accepted as biological fact, it is far too broad to test specific human behaviors directly. Below that sit middle-level evolutionary theories. For example, Robert Triver's theory of parental investment and sexual selection. Trivers observed a biological reality. The sex that invests more physical resources into producing offspring will consistently evolve to be choosier when selecting a mate. That middle-level theory generates specific evolutionary hypotheses. Because human females invest heavily in pregnancy and nursing, researchers hypothesized that women evolved specific psychological mechanisms to prefer men who display both the ability and the willingness to contribute resources to them and their children. Finally, this hypothesis yields highly specific, testable predictions. One prediction derived from this logic is that women will divorce men who fail to contribute expected resources, provided they can secure a better option on the mating market. This establishes rigorous falsifiability. If researchers analyze global divorce data and behavioral metrics and find that economic failure does not predict divorce, this specific prediction fails and the evolutionary hypothesis is destroyed. To build a bulletproof case, researchers transcend the limitations of single data sources. They use convergent evidence, cross-referencing archaeological records, cross-cultural data, and comparative biology. We can observe this methodology in action by analyzing physiological adaptations to sperm competition across different primate species. Gorillas operate within a highly monogamous mating structure. Because female gorillas do not regularly mate with multiple partners, a male silverback sperm rarely competes inside a female against the sperm of a rival. Chimpanzees operate in a highly promiscuous mating structure. Females copulate with multiple males, creating intense evolutionary pressure for sperm competition. This behavioral divergence creates a strict physiological prediction. Males of a species facing high sperm competition must evolve higher testicular volume relative to body weight to produce enough sperm to flush out rivals. This chart shows the testicular volume of 3 primate species as a percentage of their total body weight. The monogamous gorilla rests at a microscopic 0.02%. Humans sit slightly higher, at 0.08%. The highly promiscuous chimpanzee measures a massive 0.27%. Cross-referencing observed behavioral mating data with raw physiological metrics provides undeniable, measurable proof of evolved functional design in modern anatomy. There is a persistent academic illusion that human cultural diversity and our capacity to learn are evidence that we have transcended our evolutionary algorithms. Consider 3 universally observed forms of human learning: learning to avoid incest, learning to avoid toxic foods, learning the criteria for cultural prestige. These 3 types of learning cannot possibly rely on the same generalized brain mechanism. They require entirely different inputs to function and produce entirely different behavioral outputs. To learn incest avoidance, the brain tracks childhood co-residence to generate sexual disgust. To learn food aversion, it links physiological nausea to a specific smell to trigger vomiting. To learn prestige, it maps social attention structures to generate mimicry of high-status individuals. Invoking the word learning merely describes a behavioral outcome. Identifying the specific, evolved biological algorithm that makes that learning possible is the actual scientific explanation. Our mental algorithms are exquisitely calibrated, but they are calibrated for a world that no longer exists, a phenomenon known as evolutionary mismatch. Every adaptation we possess was shaped by the environment of evolutionary adaptatedness, or EEA. This is not a specific place in time, but the statistical composite of ancestral selection pressures, which were largely defined by caloric scarcity. During the Pleistocene, fat and sugar were incredibly rare and valuable resources. Today, we exist in an industrial food environment of hyper-availability. A psychological algorithm that historically guaranteed survival by driving early humans to gorge on rare calories is still running in our brains right now. But in a modern context, that exact same algorithm produces fatal outputs, driving epidemics of chronic obesity and heart disease. Humanity is navigating the complexities of the modern industrial world while running ancient software. Mapping these rigid, testable evolutionary algorithms is the only rigorous, non-arbitrary way to decode the true parameters of human nature.